Sometimes people ask me how I survived. The answer is simple. When you've already slept with the devil himself, nothing else in this world can truly scare you. Hi there, my loves. My name is Nancy Peterson, but everyone knows me as Grandma Nancy. I'm 78 years old, born in 1947 in Pine Ridge, a small town in rural Montana that barely shows up on maps. The place was so dry that even the tumbleweeds seemed embarrassed to grow there, but it was our little corner of the world, you know? Today, I'm going to tell you a story I've kept locked in my chest for over 65 years, something I never told my children or my grandchildren. So if you're watching this video right now, please hit that like button, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, and ring that notification bell, because your support gives me the strength I need to pull out this thorn that's been stuck in my heart for so long. Before I start my story, I want to thank you because we've reached 20,000 subscribers on Grandparents' Tales. Good heavens, that's a lot of people. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Are you from Texas, California, New York, or maybe even from Canada? I want to get to know each one of you, my dears. Our house in Pine Ridge was small, made of wood siding, 2 windows in front, and a door that was always creaking. We were a simple family. My father, Anthony, my mother, Sarah, my little brother Jimmy, and me. Dad worked as a loader at the town's grain elevator, carrying sacks of wheat, corn, whatever needed moving. Mom took in laundry, scrubbing until her hands were red as beets. Until I was 9 years old, life was hard, but it had a certain peace. I remember Mom humming while hanging clothes in the backyard, the smell of coffee brewing early in the morning, the stories that Grandma Ruth would tell about ghosts and spirits when she came to visit. Our bellies weren't always full, but our hearts had a warm feeling. Everything changed when Mom got sick. It started with a cough that wouldn't go away, then came the fever, the exhaustion. It's just a bad flu, she'd say, trying to calm us down. But it wasn't. The town doctor said it was tuberculosis, a word that back then sounded like a death sentence in our region. They sent Mom to a sanatorium in Billings. I was 10 years old, Jimmy only 7. We were left alone with Dad, who had never been an affectionate man, but had never been mean either. At least, that's what I thought. In the first weeks after Mom left, Dad seemed lost. He didn't know how to cook properly. Clothes stayed wrinkled, the house became a mess. Even though I was tiny, I tried to help. I learned to make rice, wash the simpler clothes, take care of Jimmy. "You're just like your mother, Nancy," Dad would say, looking at me in a strange way. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Today, I know it was the beginning of the nightmare. It was on a stormy night that everything began. I remember the thunder was so loud the wooden walls shook. Jimmy, scared, came to sleep on my mat. We shared a small room while Dad slept in the bigger room, where he had the bed he used to share with Mom. I woke up in the middle of the night with a strange feeling, a weight on top of me, a strong smell of whiskey, heavy breathing. I opened my eyes in the dark and felt my father's big hand covering my mouth. "Stay quiet, little Nancy," he whispered in my ear. "If you scream, you'll wake up your brother." "You don't want to scare him, do you?" What happened next is something that still gives me chills to tell. His hands, rough from work at the grain elevator, touching where they should never touch. The weight of his body crushing mine, so small still. The pain, my God. The pain I felt that I couldn't even express because he kept his hand over my mouth. Beside me, Jimmy moved. For a moment, I thought he was sleeping, but when I glanced over, I saw his little eyes open in the darkness, shining with tears. He was awake. He was seeing everything, but he was paralyzed with fear, just like me. When it was over, Dad got up, straightened his clothes, and said, as if he were talking about the weather, "This stays just between us, little Nancy. If you tell anyone, especially your mother when she comes back, nobody will believe you. They'll say you made it all up for attention. And then I'll have to send you away, to your Aunt Zelda's place in Missoula. You'll never see your little brother again. Is that what you want?" I shook my head, swallowing my tears. No, I didn't want to be separated from Jimmy. He was the only person in the world who made me feel less alone. Dad left the room, and only then did Jimmy come close to me, trembling. He was only 7 years old, but his eyes seemed much older that night. "Nancy, did he hurt you?" he asked quietly, his voice choked. "Go to sleep, Jimmy," was all I could say, turning away, wanting to disappear, wanting to die of shame. That was the first night. Many others followed. Dad started drinking more, staying home longer. He made up excuses not to go to work. "My back's hurting," he'd tell the neighbors, but I knew he just wanted to stay home, waiting for night to fall. I learned to fear sunset. While other kids on the street played until late, I made excuses to go inside early. "I have to make dinner for Dad," I'd say. "I have to take care of Jimmy." Actually, I was trying to delay the inevitable. The earlier we slept, the sooner would come the moment I feared most. Jimmy became my silent accomplice. He pretended to sleep when Dad entered the room, but I know he was always awake. Sometimes, when the desperation was too great, I would squeeze his little hand under the thin blanket, and he would squeeze back, as if saying, "I'm here, I won't abandon you." After Dad left, Jimmy would come close to me, hug me while I cried softly. He didn't say anything. What could he say? He was just a boy. But that hug, that pure and innocent contact, was the only thing that kept me from going crazy. Once, Jimmy tried to stop it. He was 8 years old then, skinny as a twig, but full of courage. When Dad entered the room and started approaching my mattress, Jimmy stood up. "Leave Nancy alone, Dad," he said, his thin voice trembling but firm. Dad looked at him as if he were seeing an insect. With a quick movement, he gave Jimmy a slap that threw him against the wall. The sound of his head hitting the wooden planks still echoes in my nightmares. "Next time you open that mouth, it'll be much worse," Dad said, before turning his attention back to me. That night, after Dad left, Jimmy cried in my arms, a trickle of blood running from a cut on his eyebrow. "Sorry, Nancy," he sobbed. "Sorry I can't protect you." "Don't try anymore, Jimmy," I begged. "He might really hurt you. Promise me you won't try again." He promised, but I saw in his eyes that something had changed. A seed of hatred had been planted. The situation got worse when we received news. Mom wouldn't be coming back anytime soon. The treatment was being more difficult than expected. She would stay at least another year at the sanatorium. Dad smiled when he read the letter, a smile that chilled me to the bone. "It's just the three of us now, little Nancy," he said, running his hand through my hair in a way that made me nauseous. A united family. By then, I was already 11 years old. The nightly visits were almost daily. My body, which was beginning to show the first signs of womanhood, ached constantly. At school, the teachers noticed I was always tired, distracted. "What's happening, Nancy?" asked Mrs. Collins, my teacher, one day after class. "You used to be such a good student. Now you just stare out the window." I almost told her. The words were on the tip of my tongue. But then I remembered Dad's threat, "Nobody will believe you." And I remembered Jimmy, how we would be separated if someone found out. "Nothing, ma'am. I just miss my mother." Mrs. Collins believed it, or pretended to believe it. Back then, certain things weren't discussed, especially in small towns. Family secrets were kept under lock and key, like sins buried in the backyard. Time passed, and I learned to live in that hell. During the day, I was the same old Nancy. I studied, helped with household chores, took care of Jimmy. At night, I became someone else, someone who floated outside her own body while it was being violated. I learned to separate myself from the pain, to pretend it was happening to someone else. Jimmy and I created a code. When Dad went out drinking on weekends, we knew he would come back worse. So before sleeping, Jimmy would say, "Let's go to Dreamland, Nancy." It was our way of preparing each other. That night, the monster would come with more force. When I turned 12, something started changing inside me. Fear was gradually giving way to a dull, constant rage that burned like embers. I started thinking of ways to escape, to free myself from that torment. But how? Where would I go? And Jimmy? I would never abandon him. It was around this time that chance, or maybe God for those who believe, put Mrs. Zelda in our lives. She was an elderly woman who lived alone at the end of the street, a retired midwife who had a reputation as a healer. People said she knew herbs that could cure any illness, that she could remove curses, evil eye, all kinds of bad things. One day, Jimmy fell while playing and cut his knee on a piece of glass. The cut was deep, bleeding a lot. Dad wasn't home, thank God, and I, desperate, ran to Mrs. Zelda's house. She received us with a calm that seemed to warm the soul. She cleaned Jimmy's wound, made a bandage with herbs that took away the pain almost instantly, and gave us a sweet tea that tasted like cinnamon and comfort. While taking care of Jimmy, Mrs. Zelda looked at me differently, as if she could see through me, through the loose clothes I wore to hide the marks, through the fake smile I had learned to maintain. "Child," she said, after Jimmy fell asleep on her old sofa, "there's something bad happening in your house, isn't there?" I froze. How did she know? Was she really a witch, like people said? "No, Mrs. Zelda. Everything's fine," I stammered, looking down. She took my hands in hers, old, wrinkled hands, but so warm and secure. "Nancy, look at me. I know the signs. I've seen many girls with that same look you have, the look of someone carrying a burden too heavy for small shoulders. It was like a dam bursting inside me." The tears came, thick, desperate. I couldn't speak, just cry like I had never allowed myself to. Mrs. Zelda hugged me, let me cry until I had no more tears. Then, with a gentle but firm voice, she said, "You don't need to tell me now, but know that there is help in this world. There's a way out. When you're ready, come see me." Alone. Those words planted a little seed of hope in my heart. There was help. There was a way out. Maybe, just maybe, the nightmare could have an end. What I didn't know was that the end would come in a way I could never imagine. And that my little brother, the one who witnessed everything in silence, would have a much bigger role than I expected in our liberation. My dear viewers, this is just the first part of my story. It's hard to talk about, the memories still hurt, but as they say, a word spoken is an arrow shot. Now that I've started, I need to go to the end. I thank each one of you from the bottom of my heart for following me. If this story is touching your heart, please share it with someone you think needs to hear it. Sometimes our pain helps heal others' pain. Jimmy had a very special way of comforting me after the bad nights. He would gather little wildflowers, daisies, dandelions, wild roses, and leave them on my pillow. He never said anything, just put them there, like a silent message. "There's still beauty in this world, Nancy." My little brother turned 9 around that time. He was a skinny boy with big, expressive eyes that seemed to hold more wisdom than any child should have. While other boys his age ran through Pine Ridge's streets playing ball or catching frogs, Jimmy preferred to stay close to me, like an invisible guardian. We almost didn't need words. We developed our own language, made of looks, small gestures, signals that only we understood. A tug on the ear meant, "Be careful." 3 little coughs in a row meant, "He's in a bad mood today." A short whistle was, "Everything's okay. We can relax a little." This way, we protected each other as best we could. When Dad came home with that whiskey smell stronger than usual, Jimmy would fake a stomachache, fever, anything to sleep between me and the door, as if his skinny little body could serve as a barrier. It didn't work, of course. Dad would simply push him aside, sometimes with such force that Jimmy would hit the wall. But my brother never gave up. The next night, there he was again, trying to be my shield. "Why don't you scream, Nancy?" he asked me once in a whisper after Dad had left our room. "If you scream really loud, the neighbors will hear." "Then they'll separate us," I replied, holding his little trembling hands. "I can't let that happen, Jimmy. We're all we have in this world." He squeezed my hand back, silent tears running down his dirty little face. "But he's hurting you. Every day worse." It was true. Over time, Dad became more violent, more demanding, as if he needed more to satisfy that demon that lived inside him. The marks on my body were no longer just invisible ones. There were bruises on my arms, legs, sometimes even on my face. At school, I started making up excuses. "I fell from the apple tree in the yard," I'd say. Or, "I tripped on a rock on the path." The teachers pretended to believe, or maybe they really did believe. Back then, in small towns, a poor girl's black eye didn't cause surprise. It was just another detail of the landscape, like the stray dogs on the streets or the drunks sleeping in the town square. Jimmy suffered, watching my suffering. Each night, he witnessed the abuse. Something died inside him. The happy boy he once was disappearing, giving way to a serious child with dull eyes and rare laughter. At school, His teacher sent a note. Jimmy is very quiet, doesn't play at recess, doesn't participate in classes. Did something happen at home? Dad read the note, gave a dry laugh, and threw it in the fire. Nosy teacher. The boy is quiet, takes after my father. Let her mind her own business. But it wasn't just at school that Jimmy was changing. At home, he became more observant, more attentive to everything. He noticed the times Dad left and returned, listened to his conversations with friends at the saloon, paid attention to his habits like a scientist studying a dangerous animal. Once I caught Jimmy going through Dad's things. He was rummaging through the drawer where he kept his razor, the week's money, old documents. "What are you doing?" I asked, scared. "If he catches you..." Jimmy closed the drawer quickly. "I was just looking to see if I could find any letter from Mom. I wanted to know if she's coming back soon." I believed, or wanted to believe. But something in his eyes told me there was more. A new determination, a small but constant fire, like embers that refused to go out. Our bond became even stronger in those days. We were like two castaways clinging to the same board, adrift in a stormy sea. All we had was each other. At night, when we managed to be alone, we told each other stories. Stories of distant places where no one would hurt us. Jimmy had an incredible imagination. He invented entire cities with details so vivid you could almost smell the scents, hear the sounds. "We're going to run away someday, Nancy," he'd say, his eyes shining in the dark. "We're going to a place far away where he'll never find us." "Where to?" I'd ask, entering the fantasy, allowing myself to dream for a few minutes. "To New York, or California, or even to another country. They say in England everyone speaks like us. It would be easy to get by there." I would smile, stroking his hair. "And how are we going to get there, smarty?" "I'm going to work, save money. When I get bigger, strong like Joe from the hardware store, I'm going to take you away from here. It's a promise." The innocence of that plan broke my heart. Joe from the hardware store was a 17-year-old boy who could carry 3 sacks of grain at once. For Jimmy, that was the height of strength, the maximum symbol of what a man could do. What he didn't understand, and how could he, is that not all the physical strength in the world could protect us from the monster that lived in our house. This monster had no claws or teeth. It had authority. It had the right, given by society, to do whatever it wanted with its children, within the 4 walls we called home. Our visits to Mrs. Zelda's house became more frequent. I didn't need an excuse. Dad almost never asked where we were during the day, as long as we were home when he arrived. Mrs. Zelda always received us with a smile and some simple treat, a piece of cornbread, molasses candy, whatever she had. She never pressured me to talk about what happened at home. She seemed to know that when I was ready, I would tell. Meanwhile, she offered us refuge, a little corner of peace where we could just be children for a few hours. It was during one of these visits that I discovered how much Jimmy knew more than he showed. Mrs. Zelda had asked me to get some mint from her backyard, and I was out there for a good few minutes. When I came back, I heard Jimmy's voice coming from the kitchen. "He does bad things to her, Mrs. Zelda, every night. I see everything, but I can't do anything." I froze outside the door, my heart beating so hard it seemed to want to jump out of my mouth. "And your mother, boy? Can't she help?" Mrs. Zelda's voice sounded low, controlled, but I could feel the contained anger in it. "Mom's sick, far away. She has tuberculosis. Dad said if we tell anyone, they'll take Nancy away and I'll never see her again." There was silence, and then Mrs. Zelda's voice, even lower. "There are times, my child, when we need to take justice into our own hands. This world wasn't made to protect girls like your sister." I couldn't hear what Jimmy replied, because at that moment a dog started barking in the yard, startled by a cat. I entered the kitchen as if I hadn't heard anything, handing the herbs to Mrs. Zelda, but that conversation kept hammering in my head. Take justice into our own hands. What did Mrs. Zelda mean by that? And more importantly, what had Jimmy understood from those words? The days passed, and with them came my 13th birthday. There was no celebration, of course. Dad didn't even remember. But Jimmy had saved a little piece of peach candy that he got at school and shared it with me, singing "Happy Birthday" quietly, just the 2 of us in the backyard. 13 years old, he said, looking at me seriously. "Now you're a young lady, Nancy." I smiled sadly. I didn't feel like a young lady. I felt old inside, as if I had lived 1,000 years of suffering. My body was changing, yes. I was becoming more like Mom, as Dad made sure to remind me on the most terrible nights. But inside, I was just a scared girl, trapped in a life I didn't choose. It was after this birthday that things started getting even worse. Dad began bringing friends home, men as drunk as him, with looks that followed me around the house like snakes stalking a mouse. "Your daughter's becoming a pretty little woman," I heard one of them comment one night when they thought I was in the room. "Just like Sarah when she was young." Dad's laugh sounded like a growl. Yeah, her mother's face, but more obedient. Fear turned into absolute terror. If before I feared what Dad did, now I feared what he might allow others to do. I started locking the bedroom door at night, pushing the old dresser against it for reinforcement. It worked for a few nights. Dad would bang, curse, threaten, but would eventually give up, going back to the living room to drink more with his friends. But I knew it was only a matter of time before he broke down that door or found another way to get to me. Jimmy, always attentive, noticed my growing fear. One night, while we waited for sleep to come, or pretended to wait, since real sleep was a luxury we rarely had, he held my hand tightly. "Nancy, we need to do something," he whispered, so low I almost didn't hear. "This can't continue. What can we do, Jimmy? We're just children." He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had a gravity I had never heard before. "Mrs. Zelda knows things that can help." "What kind of things?" I asked, feeling a chill run up my spine. "Herbs, medicines, things that can make a person sleep so deep they don't even feel when someone messes with their stuff. Or things that can make someone not wake up anymore." The last part was said in an almost inaudible breath, but the weight of those words filled the dark room. What Jimmy was suggesting was so scary, so final, that my first instinct was to completely reject it. "No, Jimmy, that's a sin. It's a crime. We can't—" "It's more of a sin what he does to you every night," Jimmy interrupted, his voice choked. "God can't want you to suffer like this. And if he doesn't do anything to help, we have to help ourselves." The raw wisdom in those words, coming from a boy of only 9 years, left me speechless. What Jimmy was proposing was unthinkable, terrible. And yet, as I lay there in the dark, waiting for the creak of the door that would announce another night of horror, a little voice inside me asked, what if it was the only way out? That night, Dad managed to break the door lock. The dresser was pushed with such force that a drawer popped out, scattering our few clothes across the floor. What followed was worse than all the previous nights combined. The anger over the resistance, over the locked door, turned Dad into a wild beast without any trace of humanity. When it finally ended and he left, leaving me like a rag thrown on the floor, Jimmy approached. He had hidden under the bed, trembling, hearing everything. His little face was wet with tears, but his eyes had something new, a cold, adult determination that shouldn't exist in someone so young. "Tomorrow we're going to talk to Mrs. Zelda," he said, not as a suggestion, but as a decision already made. "This can't happen again, Nancy. I won't let it." I didn't have the strength to argue. That night, something broke inside me, not just my body, but my resistance, my hope that things could get better without drastic action. I looked into my little brother's eyes, that child who had seen and heard things no child should witness, and for the first time, I agreed with a nod. Little did I know that simple gesture would be the beginning of a plan that would change our lives forever. A plan born from the desperation of 2 children, fed by the complicit silence of an old midwife, and that would culminate in something that not even in my darkest dreams could I imagine. The next morning, I couldn't get up from the mat. Every little piece of my body screamed in pain, as if I had been trampled by a herd of cattle. Jimmy brought a bowl of water, wet a cloth, and gently passed it over my face, cleaning the dried blood. "I'm going to tell Dad you're sick," he said, arranging the torn blanket over me, "that you can't go to school today." He didn't even need to. Dad left early, without even looking into our room. Maybe he was ashamed of what he had done, or, more likely, he simply didn't care. I stayed in bed all day, floating between consciousness and restless sleep filled with nightmares. Jimmy skipped school to stay with me. From time to time, he would go out and come back with a little water, A ripe banana he had gotten from the neighbor's tree, a piece of molasses he kept under the bed for emergencies. At dusk, when the sun was beginning to set, casting that orange light through the window cracks, I managed to sit up. My lips were cracked, my left eye barely opened from being so swollen. "We need to go to Mrs. Zelda's," Jimmy insisted, looking nervously out the window. "Before he comes back." "I can't go out like this, Jimmy. Everyone will see, will know. We'll go through the back, through the farmland path. Nobody will see us." It was a longer path, behind the houses, crossing a pasture and an abandoned cornfield. It would be almost impossible for me, in the state I was in. But the desperation in Jimmy's eyes was so great that I didn't have the heart to say no. With great difficulty, I got dressed. Jimmy helped me put on my rubber sandals, the only ones I had. I put a scarf over my head, trying to hide as much of my face as possible. We left through the back, like criminals fleeing a crime scene. The walk was torture. Each step was a stab in my most intimate parts, hurt beyond what any girl should endure. Several times I had to stop, lean on Jimmy, breathe deeply to keep from fainting. The sun had completely disappeared when we finally reached the back of Mrs. Zelda's house. Jimmy knocked on the kitchen door, 3 light knocks as we had agreed. Mrs. Zelda answered almost immediately, as if she were waiting for us. When she saw my condition, her wrinkled face contorted in an expression that mixed horror and fury. "Dear Lord," she murmured, helping me inside, quickly closing the door behind us. "Child, what did they do to you?" "It was him," Jimmy answered before I could say anything. "It was the worst of all this time. I thought he was going to kill her." Mrs. Zelda took me to a small room at the back of the house, where there was a narrow bed covered with a patchwork quilt. Carefully, she helped me lie down. "I'm going to prepare some medicines, child. For the pain, for the wounds. But first I need to see where it hurts." With gentle hands, so different from the brutal hands that hurt me night after night, she examined my injuries. She didn't say anything, but I saw silent tears running down her wrinkled cheeks as she applied a fragrant balm to my scrapes. "This can't continue," she finally said, more to herself than to us. "This is the devil's work, not people's. You need to help us," Jimmy pleaded, standing at the room door, his eyes wide with worry. "The way you talked about the other day. Justice by our own hands." Mrs. Zelda looked at him for a long time, then at me, as if she were measuring something, weighing a serious decision. "Are you sure about this, boy? It's a path of no return." "I am," Jimmy answered without hesitation. "If we don't do anything, someday he's going to kill her, or do worse." What could be worse than what I already lived, I thought to myself. But deep down, I knew the answer. Dad had started bringing friends home, friends who looked at me that way. It was only a matter of time before I couldn't even complete the thought. It was too terrible. Mrs. Zelda sighed deeply, as if the weight of the world were on her thin shoulders. "I'm going to make tea for the pain now. Then we'll talk about the rest." She left the room, leaving me alone with Jimmy. My little brother approached the bed, held my hand between his, still so small. "Everything's going to be okay, Nancy," he whispered, with a conviction that didn't match his 9 years. "I promise. He'll never hurt you again." Mrs. Zelda's tea took effect almost immediately. The pain that throbbed throughout my body began to diminish, giving way to a pleasant numbness. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, I relaxed completely. I must have fallen asleep, because when I opened my eyes again, morning light was coming through the window cracks. For a moment I was disoriented, not knowing where I was. Then the memories came back. The terrible night, the painful walk to Mrs. Zelda's house, the mysterious tea. I sat up in bed, surprised to realize that the pain had diminished considerably. It still hurt, yes, but it was bearable now. I managed to get up alone, walk to the room door. From outside, I heard low voices coming from the kitchen. I recognized Mrs. Zelda's and Jimmy's, talking in urgent tones. I approached slowly, still a bit dizzy. "Has to be in the food," Mrs. Zelda was saying. "Or in the drink, preferably in the whiskey so he won't taste it." "And how long does it take to work?" Jimmy's voice, serious like an adult's. "Depends on how much he takes. If it's all at once, about an hour. If it's little by little, it could take days. And there's no danger of him finding out? Not if you're smart. The taste is strong, but whiskey disguises it well. And when he starts feeling the effects, he'll think it's just drunkenness. I froze halfway there. What were they talking about? What plan was this? Part of me knew exactly what was happening, but another part, maybe the innocent girl who still existed somewhere inside me, refused to believe. I entered the kitchen, and both heads turned to me, guilty expressions on their faces. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice still weak. Mrs. Zelda exchanged a look with Jimmy, then sighed. "Sit here, my child. We need to talk." I sat at the worn wooden table, my hands trembling. Jimmy came to my side, took my hand like he did so many times when he felt my fear. "Nancy," Mrs. Zelda began, her voice grave, "what your father does to you isn't just a sin. It's a crime, a big crime. If the police knew, he would go to prison for many years." "But nobody will believe," I replied automatically, repeating what I had heard from Dad so many times. "They'll say it's my lie." "Maybe. The law doesn't usually protect girls like you, it's true. But there's another justice in this world. The justice we make when nobody else will do it for us." I looked at her without completely understanding, or pretending not to understand, because deep down, I knew. I knew by the tone of her voice, by Jimmy's determined look, by the conversation I had just heard. "Are you talking about killing my father?" The words came out like a breath, almost inaudible, as if saying them out loud could make the idea more real, more terrible. Mrs. Zelda didn't answer directly. Instead, she took my hands in hers, looked me directly in the eyes. "What I'm going to ask you now is very serious, girl. I need you to answer with your heart. If you could choose between his life and your own life, what would you choose?" I couldn't answer immediately. The question was simple, but the answer involved things a 13-year-old girl shouldn't need to consider. "It's not just my life," I finally said. "It's Jimmy's too. If Dad finds out we tried to do something against him, he'll do much worse than he already does," Jimmy completed, his voice trembling. "Nancy, I know it's a sin. The teacher at school said that killing is the worst sin of all. But he's not a real father. He's a monster. And we kill monsters in stories, don't we?" The childish yet so adult logic of Jimmy caught me off guard. It was true. In the stories Mom used to tell before getting sick, the evil dragon always died in the end. The giant who threatened the village was always defeated. Good always won over evil. But in real life, girls like me suffered in silence, and nobody came to save them. In real life, the monster wasn't a fantastic creature with scales and claws, but an ordinary man, a father that neighbors greeted on the street, that the preacher blessed at Sunday Mass. "What if it doesn't work?" I asked, my voice almost gone. "What if he finds out? What if—" "It will work," Mrs. Zelda affirmed, with a certainty that only the very old or very young possess. "I'm 80 years old, girl. I've helped many people in this life. Some in ways the preacher wouldn't approve of, it's true. But God judges by the heart, not by appearances. And in my heart, I know I'm doing the right thing." I looked at her, at Jimmy, at my own injured hands. I thought about the nights of terror, the constant fear, the pain that seemed to have no end. I thought about Mom, far away at the sanatorium, not knowing what was happening to her children. I thought about the future. Would there be any if we continued like this? "What do we need to do?" I asked finally, feeling like I was jumping off a cliff. The relief on Jimmy's face was immediate, as if an immense weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Mrs. Zelda squeezed my hands tightly, her eyes shining with a mixture of sadness and determination. "First, you need to recover. Get strong again. It'll take a few days, and during this time, your brother will go back home, so as not to raise suspicions." "I don't want to leave Nancy alone," Jimmy protested. "You have to, boy. If you both stay missing, your father will get suspicious. We'll look for you. We'll ask questions around the neighborhood. Better for you to go back. Say your sister went to visit a friend in another town. That she got a message from your mother asking her to go." Jimmy didn't seem convinced, but ended up agreeing. We arranged that he would tell Dad I had gone to visit a cousin in Great Falls, that I would be back in a few days. It was a fragile lie, but knowing Dad, he wouldn't care much. Maybe he'd even be relieved not to have to see me for a while. after what he had done. In the 3 days I spent at Mrs. Zelda's house, I recovered not only my physical strength, but also a bit of hope. For the first time in years, I slept without fear, ate without my stomach churning with dread, breathed without feeling like each breath could be my last. Mrs. Zelda took care of me like a grandmother takes care of a sick granddaughter. She made strengthening foods, chicken broth, cornbread with butter, bean soup with bacon, and made me eat everything, even when I had no appetite. She gave me herbal baths to heal the wounds on my body, and talked to me at length about things I had never heard before, about a woman's right to her own body, about how what Dad did was a crime anywhere in the world, about how I deserved a life without fear. "There are more people like you than you imagine, my child," she told me one night while braiding my hair. "Women, girls, who suffer in silence. Some manage to escape, others stay trapped until the end of their lives, or until something worse happens. Have you helped others, like me?" I asked timidly. She was silent for a moment, her hands stopping in the middle of the braid. "I have, my child. More than I'd like. And some chose the same path you and your brother are choosing now." I didn't ask more. I didn't need to know details. It was enough to know we weren't the first to face that kind of horror, nor the first to take desperate measures to escape. On the morning of the 4th day, Jimmy appeared early. He was thinner, with deep, dark circles, but there was a nervous excitement in his movements. "Did he believe it?" I asked, while we ate the corn porridge Mrs. Zelda had prepared. "He believed. Didn't even ask many questions, just wanted to know when you're coming back." I exchanged a look with Mrs. Zelda. Dad's question wasn't out of concern. We knew well. It was for something else, something that made my blood freeze even being far from him. "And what did you answer?" Mrs. Zelda asked Jimmy. "That she comes back tomorrow, that she just went to visit the cousin who's sick, tomorrow." The word fell like a stone between us. It meant our time was up, that the plan needed to be put into action now, or everything would go back to being like before, or worse. "Then it's today," Mrs. Zelda declared, getting up from the table. She went to an old cabinet in the corner of the kitchen, opened a bottom drawer, and took out a cloth bundle. She placed it on the table between us. "This here is white snake root, mixed with other herbs that only I know. It has no taste, no smell, when mixed with whiskey. But it's deadly." I looked at the bundle as if it were a snake ready to strike. It was small, harmless in appearance. Hard to believe that something so simple could end a life. "How much does he need to drink?" Jimmy asked, his voice firm, as if he were asking about a common recipe. "All of it. If it's less, it might just make him very sick. And then it'll be worse for you." "And how do we do it? Put it in food? In whiskey it's safer. He always has a bottle hidden, doesn't he?" Jimmy nodded. "He does. Under his bed. Says it's his special reserve, just for him. Then that's where you'll put it. All at once, and then just wait." The simplicity of the plan was frightening. It didn't seem real that something so easy could solve the problem that had destroyed our childhood. But at the same time, a voice inside me screamed that it was wrong, that it was a sin, that there would be terrible consequences. "What if they find out?" I asked, my voice almost gone. "The police, the neighbors, they won't find out," Mrs. Zelda assured. "It'll look like he drank too much, that his heart couldn't take it. It happens a lot around here, you know. Men who drink until they drop don't get up again one day." It was true. In recent years, at least 3 men in town had died like that, found in the morning after a night of drinking, cold as stone. Nobody investigated much. It was the natural destiny of those who lived with a bottle in hand, they said. And you can't tell anyone. Ever. Not when you're old, not in confession, not on your deathbed. This secret goes with you to the grave, understand? We nodded solemnly. The weight of that secret pact seemed even heavier than the bundle Mrs. Zelda pushed into Jimmy's hands. "Keep it well," she instructed. "Inside your clothes where nobody will see. Only take it out when it's time to put it in the bottle." Jimmy hid the bundle inside his shirt, close to his heart. His eyes, normally so sweet and childish, had a dark determination that scared me a little. "It's the only way, Nancy," he said, noticing my hesitation. "If not, he'll continue. It'll get worse. You heard what he said to his friends the other day, about letting them—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I had heard too, through the door, the coarse laughter, the insinuations, the terrible promises. It was only a matter of time before Dad fulfilled them. "It's right," I said finally, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Let's do it." Mrs. Zelda hugged me tight, as if she wanted to protect me one last time before sending me back to danger. "Courage, my child. Sometimes there's only one path to freedom, and it's not the easiest." We left her house when the sun was already high. The walk back home seemed longer than ever, each step bringing us closer not just to our home, but to a point of no return in our lives. While we walked side by side, Jimmy took my hand, as he did so many times to comfort me. But this time, it was he who squeezed tight, as if he needed my strength, not the other way around. "Everything's going to be okay," I whispered, trying to convince myself as much as him. "Tomorrow, we'll be free." Free. The word sounded strange, almost incomprehensible. What would freedom be like? What would it be like to sleep without fear, wake up without terror, live without that constant shadow over us? I didn't know, but I was willing to find out, even if the price was carrying forever the weight of what we were about to do. What we didn't know, as we walked back home on that hot afternoon in 1960, was that fate had other plans for us. Plans that didn't involve poison or premeditated death. But that would be equally definitive. When we got home, silence greeted us like a bad omen. There was no sign of Dad, which was strange at that hour of the afternoon. Normally he would be sleeping, recovering from the previous night's drinking, or sitting by the door, rolling a corn-husk cigarette with those thick fingers that caused me so much dread. "Where could he be?" Jimmy whispered, looking around as if Dad could jump out of some dark corner at any moment. We entered slowly, stepping on tiptoes, like two small thieves invading enemy territory. The house was a bigger mess than usual. Dirty dishes piled up in the kitchen sink, empty bottles on the floor, clothes scattered around. There was a strange smell in the air, a mixture of sweat, whiskey, and something else I couldn't identify. That's when we noticed Dad's bedroom door, slightly open. From inside came a muffled sound, like a moan or a snore. I exchanged a look with Jimmy, my heart racing. It was our chance. If Dad was sleeping, too drunk to notice our presence, we could put the poison in the bottle without problems. But first, we needed to be sure. Very carefully, Jimmy approached the door and peeked through the crack. What he saw made his little face turn pale. He backed away quickly, signaling for me to be quiet, and pulled me to the backyard. "There's a woman with him," Jimmy whispered, his eyes wide. They're in bed." The news caught me by surprise. Dad had never brought women home since Mom went to the sanatorium, at least not that I knew of. Who could it be? And what did this mean for our plan? "Who is it?" I asked quietly. "I don't know. Never saw her, but they're drinking. There's a bottle there." My brain worked quickly, trying to adapt our plan to this new situation. If Dad had company, it would be harder to put the poison in the drink without being noticed. On the other hand, if they were drinking, maybe they would become unconscious soon, and then we would have our chance. "Let's wait," I decided. "Stay out here until they sleep, or the woman leaves." We went to the back of the yard, where an old oak tree offered shade and a reasonable hiding place. From there, we could see the house without being seen. We sat on the beaten earth, leaning against the tree trunk, and waited. The sun began to set, painting the sky in orange tones. Hunger was pressing, but we didn't dare go in to get food. The bundle from Mrs. Zelda remained hidden in Jimmy's shirt, close to his heart, like a dark secret we carried. "Do you think we're going to hell?" Jimmy asked suddenly, his voice so low I almost didn't hear. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought about it, or rather, I had avoided thinking. At church, the preacher always said that taking someone's life was a mortal, unforgivable sin. But Mrs. Zelda had said something else. That God judged by the heart, not by appearances. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "But if we are, at least we'll be together." Jimmy nodded, as if that were comfort enough. For us, hell couldn't be much worse than what we already lived, and if the price of freedom was eternal damnation, maybe it was worth it. When night fell completely, we heard loud laughter coming from the house. The front door opened, and a woman came out, staggering a little. Even in the darkness, I could see she was young, maybe 20 years old, with a tight dress and disheveled hair. Dad appeared at the door, shirtless, holding a bottle. "Coming back tomorrow?" he asked, his voice slurred by drink. The woman laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the night. "If you have more of that good whiskey, I'll come back." They said goodbye, and Dad stood at the door, watching the woman walk away down the dirt road. Then he staggered back inside, closing the door behind him. "Now?" Jimmy asked, his hand already going to the hidden bundle. "Not yet," I whispered. "We have to wait for him to sleep. If he catches us—" I didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what would happen if Dad caught us trying to poison him. It would be the end of everything. We waited another hour, crouched in the dark, listening to the sounds of the night. Crickets singing, a dog barking in the distance, the gentle wind rustling the oak leaves. Finally, when the house became completely silent, we decided it was time. "I'll go," Jimmy declared, getting up. "You stay here watching. If he wakes up, you whistle like a mockingbird. Remember how we used to do?" I nodded, my heart so tight I could barely breathe. I didn't want to let Jimmy go alone, but I knew it was more sensible. I made more noise, was still a bit weak from the injuries, and if Dad suddenly woke up— "Be careful," I whispered, hugging my little brother tightly. "Anything wrong, run." Jimmy took the bundle from inside his shirt, untied the cloth knot with trembling fingers. Inside was a yellowish powder, almost shiny in the darkness. It looked harmless, like brown sugar or cinnamon. Hard to believe that could kill a grown man. "Put it all in the bottle," I repeated Mrs. Zelda's instructions. "Mix it well, and then get out of there as fast as possible." With one last determined look, Jimmy headed toward the house, silent as a cat. I stayed there, my eyes fixed on the back door, praying to all the saints I knew, asking for protection for my brave little brother. The minutes that followed were the longest of my life. Each second seemed like an eternity. I imagined Jimmy entering the room where Dad slept, pouring the poison into the bottle, the terror of being so close to the monster that tormented us. Then, suddenly, I heard a noise. It wasn't the whistle we had agreed on. It was a scream. A man's scream, furious, followed by the sound of something breaking. Without thinking, I ran to the house. When I reached the back door, I heard Dad's voice, loud and drunk. "What are you doing, boy? Messing with my things?" I ran inside, my heart in my throat. In the poorly lit living room by an oil lamp, I saw the scene that would haunt me for decades. Dad holding Jimmy by the neck, my brother's little face already red from lack of air, his little feet suspended in the air. "Let him go," I screamed, throwing myself against Dad with all the strength I could muster. It was like hitting a brick wall, but the impact made him stagger, release Jimmy for an instant. My brother fell to the floor, coughing, trying to catch his breath. Dad turned to me, his eyes injected with hatred and whiskey. "So you came back, you little whore? And still planning to kill me? I found the boy with this powder, trying to put it in my drink." He showed Mrs. Zelda's bundle, now crumpled in his big hand. The yellowish powder was spilling between his fingers, falling to the floor like golden rain. "It's not what you think," I tried to lie, my voice trembling. It's medicine. For Jimmy. He's sick." "Liar!" Dad roared, advancing toward me. "You think I'm stupid? I know exactly what this is. It's rat poison. You were going to kill me while I slept, you little devils." I backed up until I hit the wall. There was nowhere to run. I closed my eyes, expecting the blow that would surely come. But instead, I heard a war cry, a childish, desperate, but full of courage cry. I opened my eyes in time to see Jimmy running toward Dad, holding something in his hands. At the last moment, I recognized the object, the old hunting knife Dad kept on top of the cabinet, the one he used to clean fish when we still went fishing, in the times when Mom was home and everything seemed normal. "Leave my sister alone," Jimmy screamed, plunging the knife into Dad's leg with all the strength his skinny little body could muster. The sound that came from Dad's throat wasn't human. It was a roar of pain and fury, like a wounded animal. He turned, forgetting about me, concentrating all his rage on Jimmy. "You're going to die, boy," he growled, pulling the knife from his own leg, blood dripping and staining the dirt floor. "I'm going to finish you right now." What happened next was like a nightmare in slow motion. Dad advanced toward Jimmy, who was paralyzed with fear. I threw myself between them, trying to protect my brother. There was a push, a loss of balance, and then the knife. I don't know exactly how it happened. Whether Dad tripped on his own blood, whether Jimmy tried to defend himself, whether I pushed at the right moment. I only know that in one instant, Dad was standing, threatening. In the next, he was on the floor, the knife buried in his chest, his eyes wide with surprise. "Nancy," he murmured, my name coming out like a blood bubble between his lips. And then, nothing more. We stood paralyzed, Jimmy and I, looking at our father's body, fallen on the living room floor like a discarded rag doll. Blood spread, forming a dark pool around him, shiny in the weak light of the oil lamp. Is he dead?" Jimmy asked, his voice almost inaudible. I knelt beside the body, trembling so much I could barely move. I put my hand on Dad's neck, looking for a pulse, like I had seen Mrs. Zelda do once when old Sebastian fainted at the market. Nothing, just the still warm skin, but already beginning to cool, and the complete absence of movement. "He is," I replied, moving away as if the body could attack me at any moment. "He's dead." The reality of the situation fell on us like a storm. We had planned to kill our father, yes, but with poison, during sleep. A death that would seem natural, that wouldn't raise suspicions. Now we had a bloody body in the middle of the living room, a knife, clear evidence of struggle. "What do we do?" Jimmy asked, looking at me with those huge eyes, full of fear and trust at the same time. In that moment, I needed to grow up. There was no more time to be a child, to be afraid, to hesitate. We were just the two of us now, and we needed to act fast. "We need to clean everything," I decided, my brain working frantically. "And then we have to make it look like an accident, or that someone broke into the house." We spent the following hours in a trance of terror and efficiency. We cleaned the blood from the floor as best we could. We turned the house upside down, as if there had been a robbery. We took the little money Dad kept in a biscuit tin to reinforce the idea of theft. The knife, we cleaned and threw in the creek that ran behind the town. The blood-stained clothes, we burned in the backyard, in a small fire we made with dry twigs. When the sun began to rise, we looked around. The house seemed to have been ransacked. Dad's body was stretched on the living room floor, the whiskey bottle broken beside him, as if it had fallen from his hand. The story we created was simple. We had slept in the back room, heard noises, and when we woke up, we found Dad like that. Someone must have broken into the house during the night, looking for money or things to steal. "Now we cry," I instructed Jimmy, holding his trembling little hands. "Cry really loud, so neighbor Mrs. Johnson hears and comes to see what happened." It wasn't hard to cry. The tears came naturally, not from sadness over Dad's death, but from fear, relief, guilt, 1,000 mixed emotions we couldn't name. We cried, embraced, our sobs echoing in the silent house, while the sun rose on the horizon, marking the first day of the rest of our lives. Mrs. Johnson appeared shortly after, attracted by the screams. Behind her, other neighbors. Soon the house was full of people, exclamations of horror, questions we answered between sobs, keeping our story simple, consistent. "I heard a noise, Mrs. Johnson," Jimmy told, tears running down his pale little face. "Then when I came to see, Dad was like this, on the floor. There was someone running outside. I saw through the window." Someone went to call the police, which in that small town consisted of 2 grumpy men with rusty revolvers. They asked a few basic questions, looked around, and quickly reached the conclusion we expected. A robbery gone wrong. The thief probably didn't expect to find someone home. There was a fight, and Dad ended up stabbed. "What a shame," one of the policemen commented, without seeming to really feel sorry. "But these things happen. Do you have any relatives who can stay with you?" "Our mother," I replied promptly. "She's at the sanatorium in Billings, but we have Mrs. Zelda, who's like a grandmother to us." That's how, on the same day we buried our father in a simple coffin in Pine Ridge's small cemetery, we went to live with Mrs. Zelda. She didn't ask questions. Her eyes, when she received us at her door, said she knew more than anyone suspected, but that she would take our secret to the grave. That night, when we finally were alone in the little back room she prepared for us, Jimmy approached my bed. "Did we do the right thing, Nancy?" he asked, his voice trembling in the darkness. I pulled him close to me, hugging him like I had done so many times when he was smaller, when he needed comfort after witnessing the horrors that happened in our room. "I don't know if it was right, Jimmy," I replied honestly, "but it was necessary, and now we're free." Free. The word had a strange taste in my mouth, like a fruit we had never tasted before. Sweet, but with a bitterness underneath, a reminder of the price we paid for it. In the days that followed, life began to take a new direction. Mrs. Zelda wrote to the sanatorium, informing about Dad's death and asking if Mom could come back to take care of us. The answer came 2 weeks later. Mom was better, but still not completely cured. She would need to stay a few more months, maybe a year. "You stay with me until then," Mrs. Zelda declared, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "This house is too big for an old woman alone anyway." And so began our new life. Mrs. Zelda taught us about herbs, about ancient cures, about secrets passed down from generation to generation. We went back to school, and gradually, the pitying looks from other students diminished. The story of the robbery that killed our father was diluted in the town's conversations, replaced by new events, new dramas. Jimmy started smiling again, playing like a normal child. I began sleeping without nightmares, waking up without that crushing weight in my chest. The wound inside us hadn't healed, it never would completely, but it was no longer bleeding so much. A year later, Mom came back from the sanatorium. She was thinner, with a different shine in her eyes, but alive. The reunion was a mix of joy and sadness. Joy to have her back, sadness for what we couldn't tell, for the secret we would carry forever. "You've grown so much," she said, hugging us tightly. "And changed. You have a different look now, older." We didn't tell her what Dad had done during her absence. Why would we? She already carried the weight of illness, of forced separation. We let her believe the robbery story, let her cry for her husband's death without knowing what kind of monster he really was. Over time, Mom got a job as a cook at the mayor's house. We rented a small but clean house near the school. Life took on a normal rhythm, or as normal as possible for those who carried the kind of secret we carried. At night sometimes, when everyone was sleeping, I would take Jimmy by the hand and we would go to the backyard to look at the stars. It was our moment, just ours, when we could be completely honest with each other, without fear that someone would hear. "Do you regret it?" he asked me on one of those nights when he was already 10 years old, almost a year after Dad's death. I thought for a long time before answering. I thought about the nights of terror, the pain, the humiliation. I thought about the plan with the poison, which didn't work. I thought about the knife, the blood, the body fallen on the floor. I thought about the freedom we conquered, the price we paid for it. "No," I replied finally, with an honesty I could only have with him. "I don't regret it. He was going to end up killing us, sooner or later, or worse. It was him or us, Jimmy, and I would choose us 1,000 times." My little brother nodded, as if it were exactly the answer he expected. We stayed there, in silence, looking at the stars, two children who had to grow up too fast, who had to make choices no child should have to make. But we were alive, we were together, and in some strange and twisted way, we were free. The future was uncertain, full of unanswered questions. Would the truth ever come to light? Would someone suspect? Would the weight of what we did crush us over time? We didn't know. We only knew that, at that moment, under the starry sky of rural Montana, we had each other. And for now, that was enough. What we call destiny is a funny thing, my loves. Sometimes it takes such big turns that we get lost along the way, but in the end, it seems like everything had to be exactly as it was. Even the most terrible things have a purpose that we only understand much later. 5 years passed after that night. I was already 18 years old, a grown woman, as they said around there. Jimmy was 14, growing fast, almost as tall as me. Mom had recovered well from tuberculosis, although sometimes she still had coughing fits on the most humid days. Our simple little life in Pine Ridge had found a rhythm, a peace that before seemed impossible. Nobody talked about Dad's death anymore. The robbery gone wrong had become just another sad story among so many in that small town. Our secret remained buried deep, known only by me, Jimmy, and Mrs. Zelda, who continued being our confidant and protector even after we went back to living with Mom. I worked now as a helper at the school, cleaning the rooms and sometimes even substituting teachers when they were absent. I didn't earn much, but together with Mom's salary at the mayor's house, it was enough to support us. Jimmy had gotten an afternoon job delivering packages for Mr. Jack's general store. It was on one of those deliveries that destiny knocked on our door in a way nobody could predict. Jimmy came home that afternoon with a different shine in his eyes, a nervousness that wasn't typical of him. "What's wrong?" I asked, while washing clothes at the backyard sink. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than a ghost, Nancy," he replied, sitting on the doorstep, his voice low, so Mom, inside the house, wouldn't hear. "I delivered a package today to a man who arrived in town. Do you know who he is?" "How would I know? I don't even know the guy." "He's an investigator from the state capitol. He came to solve some old cases that the police here never figured out." I felt the blood freeze in my veins. An investigator? After so much time. But why? Who would have interest in digging up old stories in a forgotten small town like ours? And what cases are those?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, my hands continuing to rub soap on the clothes as if nothing had happened. "I don't know for sure. He didn't talk much, but I heard him ask Mr. Jack about strange deaths in recent years, including Dad's." The soap slipped from my hands, falling into the water with a muffled sound. For an instant, it was as if time had gone back. Fear, that old companion I thought I had left behind, crawled up my spine like a poisonous snake. "It must be routine," I tried to say, more to calm myself than because I really believed it. "Those men from the Capitol always want to show off when they come to rural areas. Maybe he doesn't even know what he's really looking for." But Jimmy's expression told me he wasn't convinced, and deep down, neither was I. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, my thoughts fixed on that unknown investigator. What if he found out? What if someone from the neighborhood had seen something that night, something they never told until now? What if his suspicions led him to us? The next morning, I decided I needed to see for myself who this man was. I got dressed carefully, put on the light blue dress Mom had sewn for Sundays, tied my hair with a ribbon, and went to Mr. Jack's store with the excuse of buying flour. The store was full, as always in the mornings. Women buying for lunch, men discussing the harvest, children trying to convince their mothers to buy candy. Mr. Jack was behind the counter, weighing beans on an old scale. "Good morning, Mr. Jack," I greeted, trying to seem casual. "I came to get a pound of flour for Mom." "Good morning, Nancy," he replied, smiling. Everyone in town called me that, even though I was already an adult. "Your mother's better from the cough?" "She is, thank God. Mrs. Zelda's syrup helped a lot." While he measured the flour, I tried to probe discreetly. "Jimmy told me there's someone new in town, a man from the Capitol?" Mr. Jack looked up, interested in my interest. "There is. Detective Augustus, from Helena. He came to solve some old cases, it seems." "Serious man of few words." "What kind of cases?" I asked, feigning casual curiosity. "Oh, those poorly explained deaths that happened around here. He says there's a pattern, that it might be the work of the same person. But I think it's just lack of things to do. Rural areas are like that. Death is death. Not everything needs complicated explanations." My heart accelerated. Pattern? Same person? This meant Dad's death wasn't the only case he was investigating. Was this good or bad? I couldn't tell. "And where is he staying?" I asked, trying not to seem anxious. "At Mrs. Clotilde's boarding house, there in the square. But if I were you, I'd stay away. A pretty girl like you doesn't need to get involved with that kind of people. Those men from the Capitol think they can do anything just because they wear a badge." I paid for the flour and left, my mind racing. Mrs. Clotilde's boarding house was on the other side of the square, just a few minutes away. Before I could think better, my feet were already taking me in that direction. The boarding house was an old 2-story building with yellowed walls from time, with a porch where there were always 3 or 4 rocking chairs. Mrs. Clotilde, a fat and talkative lady, was at the door, sweeping the sidewalk. "Good morning, Mrs. Clotilde," I greeted, trying to seem casual. "You're cheerful today, huh?" "Oh, Nancy. Good morning, my child. It's because we have an important visitor in town, a detective from Helena. Imagine, such an important man staying at my boarding house." "Really? And what brings him to these parts?" They say it's to investigate some old deaths, including your father's, may God rest his soul. Such a shame that, dying like that, robbed in his own house. My stomach did a complete flip. So it was true. He was investigating Dad's death. I had to hold onto the wall to not show the tremor that took over my body. It's such a shame, I managed to say. And has he discovered anything? Oh, I don't know about that. He's very reserved, you know. Leaves early, comes back late. But I'm sure he'll catch whoever did that to your father. Justice is slow, but it doesn't fail, as they say. At that moment, the boarding house door opened, and a man came out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair at the temples, face marked by the sun. He wore well-pressed pants and a long-sleeved white shirt, despite the heat. His eyes, a deep brown, fixed on me with an intensity that made me freeze. "Ah, Detective Augustus!" Mrs. Clotilde exclaimed, all excited. "Let me introduce you. This is Nancy, daughter of Anthony, who was killed in that robbery 5 years ago. Remember I mentioned?" The man observed me for a long moment, as if he were recording every detail of my face. Then he extended his hand in a formal gesture. "Pleasure, miss. Augustus Mendez, detective of Helena Civil Police." I shook his hand, feeling it rough and strong against mine. "The pleasure is mine, detective. Nancy Peterson. Interesting to meet you, Miss Nancy. Just today I intended to look for you for some questions about your father's death." I felt the ground disappear under my feet. It was as if an abyss had opened, ready to swallow me. But I kept my face calm, years of practice in hiding emotions finally serving some useful purpose. "Of course, detective. Whatever you want to know. But it was so long ago. I don't know if I can help much." "Whoa, sometimes it's precisely with time that certain memories become clearer," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Could you accompany me to the police station? It'll just be an informal conversation." I couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious. I nodded, and we walked side by side down the cobblestone street toward Pine Ridge's small police station. The midday sun was punishing, but the heat was nothing compared to the fire of panic burning inside me. The police station was a small, faded building, with 2 rooms and a tiny cell in the back. Detective Augustus led me to a table where there were several papers scattered. I noticed they were reports, photos, old documents. "Please sit." He indicated a wooden chair. "Would you like a glass of water?" I accepted, my throat dry as the desert in August. While he went to get the water, I quickly looked at the papers. There were photos of Dad dead, stretched on our living room floor. My stomach turned, seeing that image I had tried so hard to erase from memory. "Here you go," he said, returning with a glass of warm water. "So, Miss Nancy, let's get to what matters. I'm reviewing cases of unsolved violent deaths in the region. Your father's is one of them." "But I thought it had been a robbery," I replied, trying to seem confused. "That's what the police said at the time. That's what's in the report, yes. But there are inconsistencies, things that don't fit." My heart raced. "What kind of inconsistencies?" He looked at me for a long time before answering, as if evaluating how much he should reveal. "For example, there were no signs of break-in. The house was ransacked, yes, but in a strange way, as if someone had tried to make it look like a robbery, but without really knowing how." I felt my blood freeze. It was exactly what we had done. 2 scared children trying to create a scene they had never seen in real life, only in stories. "And there's more," he continued, flipping through the papers. "Did your father have enemies? Someone who might want to harm him?" "Not that I know of," I replied, my mouth dry despite the water. "He was reserved, kept to himself. He worked, came home, sometimes drank a little." "A little?" The detective raised an eyebrow. "From the reports I gathered, your father was known for drinking quite a bit. And when he drank, he became violent." I didn't respond. What could I say? That yes, Dad turned into a monster when he drank. That he had spent years violating me while Mom was away. That Jimmy was a silent witness to that horror. "Miss Nancy," he continued, his voice softer now, "I found in the medical post's archive records of several visits of yours. Falls, unexplained injuries, even a possible shoulder dislocation when you were 12 years old. Coincidentally, these visits stopped completely after your father's death. The floor seemed to be opening under my feet. How had he gotten those files? How had he made the connection? Everything we had hidden for so long, all the carefully constructed lies, were crumbling like a sandcastle. I was clumsy, I managed to say, my voice almost gone. I was always falling, hurting myself. Detective Augustus looked at me with something that seemed compassion. It wasn't what I expected. Miss Nancy, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to understand what really happened that night, and I have a strong suspicion it wasn't a simple robbery. We sat in silence for a long moment. The old ceiling fan spun lazily, spreading the hot air around the small room. Outside, life continued. Voices of street vendors, the sound of a wagon passing, chickens clucking in some nearby yard. Why does this matter now? I finally asked. 5 years have passed. Whatever happened, already happened. It matters because the truth always matters, he replied simply. And because there are other similar cases in the region. Men found dead in suspicious circumstances. Men who, coincidentally, had a reputation for being violent with their families. My heart stopped for an instant. Other cases? What was he insinuating? What are you trying to say? I'm saying there might be a pattern. Someone who is taking justice into their own hands. Someone who is eliminating men who abuse their families. Mrs. Zelda. Her words echoed in my mind. I've helped many people in this life, some in ways the preacher wouldn't approve of. Could it be possible? Could Mrs. Zelda be this person the detective was looking for? That sounds like something from a story, detective. I tried to deflect. This is Pine Ridge, Montana, not New York. We don't have mysterious killers around these parts. Maybe it's not so mysterious, he replied, fixing his eyes on mine. Maybe it's someone we know well, someone who had very strong reasons to do what they did. Sweat ran down my back, but it wasn't from the heat. It was pure, crystalline fear. He knew. Somehow, he knew. I'm going to be direct with you, Miss Nancy, he said, leaning over the table. I believe your father abused you. I believe that night, something went wrong. Maybe he discovered some plan. Maybe he was more violent than usual. And I believe you and your brother defended yourselves. It was self-defense, wasn't it? Not a robbery, but self-defense. The words got stuck in my throat. 5 years of lies, of secrets, of looking over my shoulder. 5 years carrying a weight no girl should carry. And now, this man, this stranger, came and put everything in words so simple, so direct. If I say yes, I managed to murmur. What happens next? Will we be arrested? My brother, my mother? Did your mother know? No. She was at the sanatorium. Tuberculosis. She never knew anything. Detective Augustus leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. Do you know why I'm investigating these cases, Miss Nancy? It's not to arrest anyone. It's because I also had a sister, younger than me, and I also had a father like yours. I looked at him, surprised by the unexpected revelation. There was an old pain in his eyes, something that never completely healed. What happened to your sister? I asked, almost without wanting to. She didn't have your courage, nor the luck of having a brother who would defend her. She hanged herself at 15. She left a letter explaining why, but my mother burned it before anyone could read it. To preserve the family's honor, she said, as if there were honor to preserve. A heavy silence fell between us. Suddenly, he was no longer the feared investigator, the man who could destroy our lives. He was just someone who understood, who knew that specific pain we carried. What's going to happen now? I asked again. He gathered the papers scattered on the table, organizing them in a folder. Officially, I'm going to close the case. The report will say that all evidence confirms the original robbery theory, that there are no reasons to reopen the investigation after so much time. And, unofficially, he smiled, a sad but sincere smile. Unofficially, I'm going to sleep better tonight, knowing that at least this time, justice was done. Even if not by conventional means. I couldn't contain the tears that finally came, after so many years of holding them back. They were tears of relief, of liberation, as if a knot that was stuck inside my chest finally came undone. But I have advice for you, Miss Nancy, he added, his voice more serious. Leave this town. You and your brother. Build a new life somewhere else, where nobody knows your story. This land holds too many memories, some that are better left behind. What about Mrs. Zelda? I asked, worried about the old lady who had helped us so much. He looked at me with curiosity. The midwife? What about her? Nothing, I replied quickly, realizing he didn't suspect her involvement. She was like a grandmother to us, that's all. Then say goodbye to her. Thank her for what she did. And move on. That afternoon, when I left the police station, I felt like I was walking on clouds. A lightness I had never experienced before took over me. The secret that weighed tons was now shared, and by some miracle had found understanding instead of condemnation. I told Jimmy everything when I got home. At first he was terrified, certain we would be arrested. But when I explained the complete conversation, the detective's story, his promise to close the case, my brother cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child. Is it over, Nancy? He asked, wiping away tears. Really over? I think so, Jimmy. But the detective is right. We need to leave here, start over somewhere else. The following week, we told Mom we wanted to try life in the state capital. Helena wasn't a big city like Chicago or New York, but for us, raised in rural areas, it seemed like a world of possibilities. Mom was sad, but understood. She always knew we wouldn't stay in Pine Ridge forever. I'm going to miss you so much, she said, preparing a bundle with our few clothes. But I understand you need to follow your destiny. Just promise you'll write and visit when you can. We promised, knowing we would keep our word. Mom wasn't to blame for anything, and she deserved to have her children nearby, even if not physically. Our last visit was to Mrs. Zelda's house. The old lady received us with her usual herbal tea, sitting in the rocking chair on the porch. So, you're leaving, she said. Not as a question, but as a statement. It's time. How do you know? Jimmy asked, surprised. She smiled, that mysterious smile she always had. Old women like me know things, boy. The wind brings news. Plants whisper secrets. We said goodbye with tears and promises to write. When we were already leaving, Mrs. Zelda called me back. Nancy, my child, remember what I told you years ago? That sometimes justice needs to be done by our own hands? I nodded, unable to speak. It's not always as we plan. Sometimes destiny has its own ways. But in the end, what matters is that you are free, and will continue to be free. She took my hand in hers, wrinkled and warm. And know that you weren't the first, nor will you be the last to find freedom that way. As long as there are monsters disguised as fathers, husbands, brothers, there will be those who need to defend themselves. I looked into her eyes, finally understanding the scope of what she said. Mrs. Zelda hadn't been just our confidant, our accomplice. She was a silent guardian of many other girls like me, women trapped in impossible situations with no way out through law or society. Now go, she said finally, releasing my hand. Build a beautiful life. Be happy. It's the best revenge against the evil that tried to destroy you. On a sunny morning in 1965, Jimmy and I boarded the bus that ran to Helena. We carried only a suitcase of clothes, some savings kept for years, and the determination to start over. What happened after that? Ah, that's another story, my dear ones. A story of reconstruction, of discoveries, of learning. In Helena, I managed to finish my studies, became a teacher. Jimmy graduated as an engineer with a lot of effort and work. I met my Clarence, a good and gentle man who taught me that not all men are monsters. I had my children, then my grandchildren. I built a life that terrified girl from Pine Ridge could never have imagined possible. Mom came to live with us years later when she retired. She lived to meet her grandchildren, to see me realize the dream of having my own little school. Mrs. Zelda visited us only once, already very elderly, and left this world taking with her the secrets of how many lives she had helped save. Detective Augustus? I never saw him again. I only learned from a newspaper years later that he had retired and written a book about unsolved crimes in rural areas. The book's title was Invisible Justice. I bought it, but never had the courage to read it. Some things are better left in the past. Jimmy married, had children. Today he's a grandfather too. We always maintain that special connection, that complicity that only those who went through what we went through can understand. Sometimes we still sit together to look at the stars, now from the balcony of my apartment in Seattle, where I moved 20 years ago. And the secret? It continues being a secret, now shared only with you, my dear ones who watch me. Why? Because stories like this need to be told, not to encourage violence or revenge, but to show there's a way out, that even in the most desperate situations, there's a path to freedom. Today, so many years later, I look back and think, was it justice? Was it crime? Was it sin? I don't know. I only know it was survival, and I would give anything so that no girl in the world would need to make the decisions I made at 13 years old. If you're watching me and going through similar situations, know that today there are laws, there are shelters, there are people willing to help. You don't need to reach the point I reached with Jimmy. Ask for help, report. There's a way out. And before I say goodbye, I really want to thank you for the 20,000 subscribers that Grandparents' Tales already has. That's a lot of people, good heavens. To participate in our monthly giveaway of $300, just be subscribed to the channel, activate the bell, like the video, and leave a comment saying where you're watching from. A loving kiss from Grandma Nancy, who learned the hard way that sometimes we need to be wolves so we won't be devoured by them. Until the next video.